Greetings, Ranger fans. Good to see you again. It's been a while. I hope that you're all doing well. I hope that you've had a good 2025 so far. I know it is hard to believe, but it has actually been one full year since the conclusion of Database Rangers Power Reviews. So we're all just kind of checking in, seeing how everybody's doing. And I figured I'd do a little Q&A since it's been quite some time since I tossed on the old jacket and done a Q&A with you guys. Um, welcome Sean, welcome Jeremy, welcome welcome Scott, welcome Obs. I didn't get I didn't quite catch your name because I'm having a little bit of trouble with the chat and it kind of glitched out on me there. Welcome Common Rider War Robots. So yeah, it's been this Monday was the 1 year anniversary of the Power Review series finale, which was also the 13-year anniversary of its premiere. It's hard to believe that I started this project over 13 years ago, and that it has now been concluded for over a year, and I've been moving on to other things. Welcome, Christian Keeley. Hello. I know first and foremost, I did promise some Q&A for the people who have already submitted some questions, so I figured that would be a good place to start. Oh, no, that's not the right place to start, because there's one thing we always love to start with, and those are three equally non-controversial phrases. So, number one, say it with me, chat, Black Lives Matter. Number two, say it with me, chat, fascism is bad. And number three, say it with me, chat, superheroes are fun. So, let's see what we have in terms of questions from some of my favorite superheroes, you viewers out there. So let's see here. So, first question is from The Pure Nerdy 264. How did you select each classic episode? And what were some deleted plots we never saw? Alright, so how did I select each classic episode? So there was a mix. We had obviously there were the 20 episodes for the run of year 3, and then we had a smattering throughout year 1 and year 2. As far as year 1, it was originally going to be, my original plan was for the first classic episode to be Dr. K from RPM. It just felt very appropriate because of the fact that, Dr. K was such a big part of the series, and I really wanted to focus on that. She was, kind of the deuteragonist of the series. And so that was my original intent for the first flashback episode. But the thing was that Megaforce threw me a bit of a curveball. You see, for the first season of Samurai, we got like we got like was it 14 episodes right off the bat, and then we had the hiatus, and then we had like the final 4 episodes of the season and the first 2 episodes of the season, and then the second season with Super Samurai, we had 13 episodes in a row, and I'm like, okay, it looks like it's probably going to be 13 episodes on the front end, 7 episodes on the back end, or something like that. That's what I was banking on for Megaforce. And then they threw me the curveball and wrapped up after only 9 episodes, which meant that I was off by 4 episodes from my plan. I'd already planned out where the series was going. Rudy, you're not late. We started right at 8, so you're maybe like 2 or 3 episodes late. Yeah, well, Megaforce did 9 because there was the 8th episode was Robo Knight, and then we had Prince Takes Night, which was a bit of a weird spot to end that on. And then Super Megaforce was the first one that actually had 8 episodes, ending on Silver Lining 2-parter. So once I realized that, I had to come up with 4 other episodes to cover, and I'm like, oh no, which 4 episodes do I do? I was scrambling a little bit, and it was really driven off the characters. So whereas originally I was going to be focusing on Dr. K for the first for the first classic episode, I instead decided to do something that was going to be matched up with Guy, because he was going to be my first partner, my first guest co-host, because we had Guy, Mayo, and then the more Posners. Guy, due to the nature of his character, I felt like I wanted to do one of the more, um, like straight-laced, police-themed seasons. And SPD seemed like the best fit because knowing Guy's backstory as someone from the Power Rangers universe, it seemed like SPD would be a good fit for something he wouldn't already know about because of the whole thing with, it being set in the future. The distant future of 2025, where of course we all are now. And so I then had to just choose what was a really good standalone episode of SPD, and Idol seemed like a really good fit. Also with the idea of, an undercover agent in an organization. Again, just matching it up to character. When it came to Mayo for the next one with Another Song and Dance, that was lining up with the 30th episode. I wanted that to be a musical episode because I thought that would be a really fun gimmick to do as my partnership with Mayo. And Mayo had the character of having grown up watching Power Rangers. That seemed to be like a natural thing, but hadn't kept up with it past Mighty Morphin and Zeo. So we decided that Another Song and Dance would be the best fit there. Then we got more Posners. I wanted something wacky. Ninja Storm seemed like a natural fit. And the Wild Wipeout, which plays around with a lot of, of the wackier elements. That flip between what's good and what's evil, again, just felt like a natural fit for the more Posners. And from there, I then had to think, okay, what's going to be a good one to wrap up the season on? Let's wrap it up with Mighty Morphin, and something that's a good standalone that felt reflective upon someone missing was Missing Green. So every time it was always driven by the characters and the story, and that process carried through for all of them. So like, Dr. K was the kickoff of the alphabet soup plot. For Turbo, I wanted to I really wanted to do Trouble by the Slice, and it just seemed like a funny idea to be doing that from what was me cooking inside some air vents. Silence is Golden, again, sneaking around Alphabet Soup, it having that silent episode where everything was from my internal monologue, and again, setting up that later plot point of me having a technopathic connection to the Squee by allowing for that inner monologue, which we teased in the Missing Green episode. From there, just emphasizing his bad day with Overdrive, trying to ramp himself up with Legacy of Power, which coincided with the 20th anniversary, because this was in 2014. So, or no, 2013. Sorry, 2013 during Megaforce, and that was right in August, so that was being released right on Power Rangers Day. And then from there, we had the Rescue Mission, again, a good match. Undercover Rangers, good match. And then Megaforce resumed from there. So all of that, you can see, I was just really looking for what fit the story and what would give me a good broad spread. Like maybe something like Stakeout could have worked, but not as well as Undercover Rangers. When it comes to like, Rangers being undercover. And I'd already done SPD, so I wanted to do Time Force. Most of the summer season episodes I had kind of figured out in advance, and then the 4 during the spring season kind of got backfilled in there. From there, we had the winter trilogy. I was looking at what seasons hadn't I tackled yet, and it felt like I need to kick it off with something big. Island of Illusion, my first season 1 Mighty Morphin episode to cover. That one felt like a really good fit, double length for the big one. From there, Yesterday Again, fitting into that time loop theme. Rangers in Reverse, flashing back to, the time that the Rangers lost. So at this point, I'd covered almost every one of the classic seasons. I had 7 during the summer season. I had covered 4, so I was up to 11. 11 plus it was 14 so far, and I still had 3 more to go. And then we get into the Summer Saga, which was a 5-episode saga. So I wanted to tackle the 3 remaining seasons I hadn't covered yet. So we got Jungle Fury, which was a good match for Guy with the backstory that I had provided with him. We had Mayo's focus in with the Mystic Force, which ultimately ended up leading into them having the magic tablet, and the more Posner's episode with Power Rangers Wild Force, fishing for a friend, again, seeing things from the villain's perspective, but also focusing on that friendship side of things. And I know I just told those were released in reverse order. And then we got into, okay, what would be a good fit for Database and K to cover at Power Morphicon, and Clash of the Red Rangers was just one that seemed like it would be a really fun one, kind of flashing back to where we started with Samurai. And I had to conclude on an RPM episode because that was the deep dive into Dr. K's backstory. So again, just kind of making sure we got all 17 of the classic seasons by the time that we were done with year 2, and flashing back to some of the stuff with Samurai and Super Samurai, and that extra focus on RPM. And I believe I've talked before about, the final 20 episodes in year 3. And every single one of those was just, okay, I want to make sure that I hit these specific episodes that are very important to me. I want to make sure that the final 5 were the final 5. I needed it to be Fighting Spirit, Forever Red, Countdown to Destruction 1 and 2, and Mighty, and Day of the Dumpster, in terms of just big milestone episodes from those first 17 seasons. And those were the big ones that I really wanted to tackle for the final 5. And then from there, I had to figure out, okay, well, what are going to be the remaining 15? What are other ones that are really important to tackle? I need to make sure that I have something that is from Turbo, focusing on the Phantom Ranger. I had to do Phantom Phenomenon. Or not Phantom. Was it? Yeah, that was... No, it wasn't Phantom Phenomenon. Which one was it? Fall of the Phantom. Fall of the Phantom. I didn't do Phantom Phenomenon. I did Fall of the Phantom. And, I wanted to make sure that I did Belly of the Beast from RPM, because I was stealing that plot point of taking over an enemy ship and transforming it into a Zord. I wanted to make sure I had a Bulk and Skull focus as one of the episodes. So, as I was going through those remaining 15, and realizing, okay, there's some episodes I want to do that are from seasons that I'm already covering in the final 5. 2 are going to get left out. And Operation Overdrive, I didn't think was going... I didn't really want to tackle, because that was kind of canonically Database's least favorite season, and it was kind of my least favorite season of the original 17. And Mystic Force, I tried and just couldn't find a good fit, because Mystic Force was so heavy on 2-parters that it was really difficult to find a good standalone episode that I felt was going to fit the story. Not to mention the fact that I was doing this whole sci-fi epic where we're out in space, and a more magically themed season just didn't really fit into the plot points that I was going through. It was up in the air a little bit on some of those, but that was ultimately how I decided it. And then I wanted to do Rangers Leap of Faith for 95. So I ended up having the three. I ended up having 3 episodes from Power Rangers in Space, and I wanted to do And Action from RPM because I wanted to do that behind the scenes episode because that felt important to the history. So I ended up with multiple episodes from RPM, and so I worked with what else seemed right. And so yeah, that was a very long answer to the first part of one question. Where the second part was asking what were some of the deleted plots we never saw. There were a few. There were a few plots that I was originally thinking of. Earliest on, I was going to have a lot more people from the Power Rangers universe bleeding over into Databases universe. I was going to try and have each person I knew be a doppelganger for somebody from the Power Rangers universe as best as I could. And I quickly realized that wasn't practical. I didn't know enough people who could reliably match up with people with characters from the franchise. I knew there was one person who was going to do who had a bit of a resemblance to Adele from Power Rangers in Space, but ultimately she ended up not being able to make it. So that's why for episode 29. There's the whole bit about how there's no waiter. There was supposed to be a waiter. The waiter was supposed to be my friend who somewhat resembled Adele, and she was going to provide us with fries, and that was just going to be a quick bit. But that even that part fell through. I wasn't going to originally have Dr. K as the deuteragonist of the series, and early on I was even going to have Mayo. I was originally going to have MJ. Not just dress up as Dr. K, but also as Alpha 5 at one point. But it would have been like Alpha 8, or whichever one made the most sense. But that one didn't really work. We had an Alpha 5 costume that was just, it was not my best work. It was something I created for a party years ago, and the helmet was kind of falling apart. It didn't feel like it was the right call, and I decided to instead focus in on the singular character that they were already playing. There was also some thought of maybe introducing Alpha later once there started to become more connections to the Power Rangers universe, but that one kind of fell through. One of the other big ones was going to be the idea that we would connect to Ziggy and bring Ziggy over, but Ziggy wouldn't be able to come over in his actual body, and instead was going to be like a little stuffed Cthulhu. That idea didn't go anywhere. That ultimately I ended up being like, I can't. This isn't working. I was going to have a little bit more stuff at like Mayo's place of work that would have led to them not going to work anymore, and there just didn't seem to be a proper spot in the story where that seemed to slot in. There was a scene that we actually shot of Guy getting coffee at Alphabet Soup that just didn't make it in. But for the most part, outside of that stuff that was sort of early on, that stuff where I wanted to kind of flesh out their lives outside the series, most of it really got solidified by the end of year 1 in terms of what the next 2 years were going to look like. Although really it ended up being more like 10 years in terms of production. So those were some of the things that didn't quite make the cut. There was also going to be, the year 2 finale was originally going to be in the more Potsner's apartment, and it was just going to be a showdown with them. But year 2, the plot ended up getting fleshed out even more than I originally thought it would, and we ended up having a much, much bigger showdown with them and Alphabet Soup and the demons and all the other things that I'd built up at that time. So that was one where, like Mayo's showdown with the more Potsners in the one computer lab that would have been like the episode. And instead I just decided to have this whole like demon war at Alphabet Soup instead, which I think was a much better choice. So that's one of those few things where um, something got cut because it got replaced with something way, way bigger. And then I'm going to keep running through the questions I have from the comments, and then I'm going to tackle the questions in the chat. Um, so with so the next question I have from Hayden Reviews Custom Combos: are you going to be at Ranger Stop 2025? The answer is sadly no. I haven't been at a convention since COVID for a couple reasons. One, yeah, obviously the pandemic really kind of disrupted my whole sense of being in large crowds. Um, I still mask everywhere. I still try to be responsible with that. Um, but I was not interested in going to conventions during the height of the pandemic. But beyond that, since I was last at Power Morphicon in 2018, I've had two children. MJ and I have two kids now, and MJ works weekends, so I'm primary childcare on the weekends, and also daycare is expensive, so we don't really have the same disposable income that we would have without children. So traveling outside of the discomfort of getting back on a plane again and getting into large crowds, there's the fact that we would need to worry about childcare and the expense. Like we've been focusing more of our expenses lately on our home and on our children, and those have been our bigger priorities, rather than me going out to hang out with a bunch of Power Ranger fans, which is fun, but just is until the kids are a little older, and circumstances are a little different, just doesn't seem like the practical choice for me in my life right now, as opposed to things like putting solar panels on our roof, and we're getting a heat pump installed next week to try and make our home more sustainable, because as I've discussed in other material that I've released over the last year, we're concerned over rising costs, inflation, and managing to still maintain a sustainable energy consumption. I don't know how long tax credits for renewables are still going to be there, so we don't know how long it's going to still be financially feasible to invest in renewable energy, but it's working to keep our costs down moving forward, so we don't need to worry about whatever other rates might be rising, let alone just being environmentally responsible. So that's the long answer of not just am I going to be at Ranger Stop, but why I won't be. But I hope that anyone who goes has a whole lot of fun. I've heard it's a good time. And then there was also the follow-up question as well of, would I be interested in a Kamen Rider War Robots cameo/role? Message me with what you want. I'm cool with doing voiceovers so long as it's something that's not too heavy commitment. I can generally record something quick. That wouldn't be a problem for me. I'm, I like doing little cameo appearances in other projects when I have the ability. I've been having other creators, doing their own guest videos on Let's Be Superheroes, so I'm happy to return that favor to other small creators as well. I've made little cameo appearances in the Humanators channel. I will be on his podcast. I'm recording for that tomorrow with an interview about the history of the series and things like that. And I know he not his channel's no longer active though. He just goes by Simeon Scott online now. But yeah, I'm up for that. And let's see what have people been asking me in the chat. To rewatch the show, it's been a minute. Favorite review. So nice work where Dr. K actually did a Megaforce review during a plot episode. Yeah, where yeah, with Man and Machine, we kind of had that little bit there where if I'm remembering which episode I'm thinking of right now, where we had that kind of guidance coming home and finding out about what's going on in the new episode. Favorite review is Trickster Treat. Trickster Treat is such a fun episode. Definitely one of my favorites. It's hard to choose a singular favorite for me because so many of them are so different in terms of what I got to experiment with. Like, obviously, the final episodes were massive, and I got to do a bunch of crazy stuff in there. But Trickster Treat is probably ranks up there as one of my favorites. I just, that episode came together really, really quick, was a lot of fun, and poured in a bunch of foreshadowing for what was going to be going on in the next 56 episodes. Jeremy Strickland, ever thought of putting it out in a long video? So when you ask that, putting it out in a long video, do you mean the story of Power Reviews? Because I'm not sure if YouTube would allow me to make a video compilation of 100 episodes. I that might be maxing out what YouTube will let me upload. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at, but that feels like that is that'd be a little much. Yeah, I the best I got is I got the playlist. You know, the playlist of all the episodes. I do need to go back and finish creating those thumbnails. I never did finish up all the thumbnails I was creating, and I do feel a little bad about that. I need to do a little cleanup on some stuff with the channel. I haven't been giving it much attention this year since I've been working on other things. But I know there's also been this. I've also been asked before if it might be possible if I might just create a video that's just story. I know that Linkara, for example, does compilation videos of his story arcs where it's just the story arc. And that works for his show because his stories tend to be segments that are just like at the beginning or end of a given video. But mine are so integrated into the review by design that I wouldn't necessarily really be able to, you know, just segment that out in a way that I feel would really be coherent. But yeah, with 100 episodes at like, you know, an average of like 20 minutes per episode, yeah, that would be like 30 something hours. Yeah, that would be like 30 something. That would be like over 30 hours, and I don't think I can do a 30-hour video. So I'm sorry about that. So let's see. Feel like 8 would have made the most sense because 7 was in Operation Overdrive, and Generations 9 and 10 were in Mighty Morphin Once and Always. Maybe if the series ever got a season 2. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that question is. What that statement's about. Kamen Rider War Robots. I'm not sure what you're talking about with the 8, 7, 9, and 10. And Once and Always. I'm not quite sure what that comment's referring to. Rudy, what gave me the idea of Guy and Mayo, the Jungle Fury, and Mystic Force? Yeah, Guy. I had always intended for Guy to have been the guy that RJ knew in Jungle Fury, who tapped him into the Morphin Grid, because I was thinking that Hexagon would be the kind of maintainers of balance in the grid, and so a Hexagon agent would have been who RJ would have been in touch with when getting his access to the Morphin Grid. And I just thought it would be cool if Guy was that guy. So I wanted to have a focus on him with Jungle Fury. I thought it would be nice to connect him with his own Pai Shui master so that he could have some additional skills to kind of keep up with how much Database had leveled up by being revealed to be a Power Ranger. And so we had Master Gel, and him being able to do the pressure points I thought was fun. Tigers Fall, Lions Rise felt like it was a good fit because it was a guy, it was about the hero who kind of had been knocked down a peg and needed to recover, and that felt like a good fit there. And then with Mystic Force, Legendary Catastros just felt like a good standalone episode that I could work with. I liked the idea of I'd introduced early on that Mayo was a LARPer. That was their reason why they couldn't do more than one co-hosting bit, and that was kind of following up on that was a kind of a real life LARPing situation out in the woods, and that just was a really fun little standalone adventure. And again, I needed something to kind of bump up Mayo's abilities as well to keep up. And it seemed like, okay, we've got a tech expert. Why not have somebody with a magic ability? That was an aspect of things that was lacking in the kind of data in the Database Ranger team. And it ended up being very useful for the possession element that was going to be prominent in the latter portion of year 2. Okay, and now Commemorate War Robots. I now recognize what you're talking about with the alpha units. Okay, yeah. 8. I was thinking 8 because, yeah. 7 actually wasn't in Operation Overdrive. That was 6. 7 was in Forever Red. So I think that's why I was a little bit off. But actually, 8 and 9 were in Once and Always. Not 9 and 10. So, but keep in mind that I was producing Power Reviews well before Once and Always came out, so that's why I was thinking 8 would be the natural next choice. Whereas in Once and Always, 8 was the one that became Robo Rita. So let's see. Sean Grove asks, do you think Database would have continued watching Power Rangers when he got back? Yeah, I think he would. He loves it. Like, it's part of who he is, and he's embraced that so hard. And he's still just going on to other adventures and finding other ways to help, and seeing if there's anything else in the universe that needs a hero. I did think for a bit about having a spin-off series, having something where we get to see what Database and Mayo get up to, but after all the time and all the effort that I put into just finishing the 100 episodes of Power Reviews, I knew I could not continue. It was going to be too much to try and create another series. But yeah, I think the thought I had that I ultimately did not pursue would have been Power Reviews Multiverse, going around fixing continuity errors across the multiverse. And that seemed like that would have been a fun idea, but it just would have been too much. Like, I was trying to think in terms of, like, could we do something that incorporates the fact that MJ is pregnant? Not sure. And then by the time I finished Power Reviews, we'd already had her 2 kids, and that was a moot point. But I even, like, had a little bit of a theme song that I was thinking through that I would, Power reviews, hopping round the multiverse. Power reviews. We know that Sentai did it. Time for continuity with you and me. Mayo and DB. Power reviews, multiverse. Something like that. That I thought would have been fun. Because I always kind of wanted there to be more of a like proper theme song for the series, but that was just something that I never committed to. Like Linkara has with Atop the Fourth Wall. But that would have been a fun idea. There was one other thing that we did consider for a little bit that sadly, one did not happen and two could not happen now, which was that we wanted um, Justin and Sarah and I had joked about how fun it would be for the More Pottsners to have a spin-off series that was going to be the More Pottsners cooking channel. And we just thought that would be super cute. But sadly, it wouldn't make any sense to do without Justin. And, we've all moved on with our lives from that idea at this point. We've all gotten older. We wouldn't be able to keep up with something like that. So, yeah. So that's some of the stuff that I was thinking, in terms of what could be post Power Reviews. Also something like maybe a Power Reviews movie. Database covers, one of the Power Rangers movies or covers Green with Evil, and we'd have a standalone adventure as a movie. But at this point, I don't know what that would even look like. I feel like once I actually got to the end of the series, it felt like the story had been told. Like, maybe Database might pop up in a cameo role in a video here or there. I feel like his character arc, was completed. Some stories have a very clear beginning, middle, and end, and I feel like Power Reviews is one of those stories. And as much as I do this forever, like, you can't do it forever. I see why people, retire from characters. Out of you to be committed to like one thing for years and years and years. I used to, back when I was a kid, wonder like, oh man, why would the actors ever leave Power Rangers? And it's it's a lot to do. You want to be able to do other things, and you just can't while you're committed to this one singular all-consuming thing. And obviously now I'm working on other projects. Let's Be Superheroes is, I'm not gonna lie, it's a channel that's struggling right now. If you haven't subscribed to it, please do. I really do want that channel to succeed as well. I feel like we're doing very important work there. If you're a creator who would like to take part in the project, please message me. If you know a creator who would like to take part in the project, please message me. I'm really proud of what we've done so far. It's just, we haven't gotten the subscribers and views yet. So it's off to a slow start still. Still under 100 subscribers. A lot of the videos have under 100 views. I'm hoping that changes. I'm hoping that calling attention to it can, give it a little bump. But as many of you know, I've never been particularly good about successfully advertising my own work. My focus has always been on the work itself. But I'm really proud of, the work that that my guest creators have done. I'm very proud of the work that I've done, especially with regards to the Food Not Bombs and the most recent Let's Be Superheroes video. It's really, or the National Union of the Homeless video. It's the most recent video is really the closest thing I've done to what I would call a proper documentary. It's a very different style of video making than I've done here on this channel. And I feel like I'm starting to approach a level of professionalism in my work with regards to that documentarian aspect of things. So let's see. Would you incorporate Dino Charge into a full power review? I mean, I know I did the Ranger logs for a few episodes before I had to kind of make the choice between Ranger logs and live reactions, and I chose live reactions because I didn't want Ranger logs to prevent me from finishing power reviews. So in terms of Dino Charge, I don't think that you're going to be seeing much of me covering Dino Charge besides what we already covered in those first 3 Ranger logs and the live reactions. Maybe someday, if I ever decide to do something like, a season retrospectives, maybe for some kind of special occasion. I don't know what that special occasion would be, since we're already it's already been 30 years now since the premiere of the series, since the premiere of Power Rangers, and the series has now been over for 2 years. So yeah, I don't really see that in the cards. Maybe I don't know. I can't think of a way that I would do Dino Charge's full power review. Just because Power Reviews is over. And Dino Charge is now, like 10 years old. Yeesh. It's hard to believe that Dino Charge is 10 years old now. Because Dino Charge premiered in 2015. So, you enjoyed the Dino Fury episode? Oh, right. Yeah, I did do for Dino Fury the rapid run-throughs and deeper looks. Although for the last run of episodes, I just had the deeper run-throughs where I did the live stream reviews of those, because again, I just needed to focus on trying to get power reviews done. I couldn't keep up the production. It's hard. It's hard to put out regular scripted material on a regular basis, especially if you're trying to do it in parallel with something larger. And now, I've got 2 kids. They take up so much of my time. Little BB is now running around and starting to talk a little bit, because they're 1.5 years old now. RJ is 4.5. They'll be doing kindergarten next year. Yeah, I'm focused on taking care of my family and doing what I can to take care of my community. I'm always happy to offer my thoughts on Power Rangers. Like, I will always have thoughts on Power Rangers. But as far as scripted thoughts, scripted material, I don't know what more I have left in me. Maybe we'll see with regards to the upcoming Disney Plus series that's supposedly in the works, on if I end up covering anything through that. I don't know what I would do. It would probably be something more along the live stream end of things rather than something scripted. Maybe sort of like, a discussion, week by week, something like that. Maybe. I'm not committing to anything right now. Let's Be Superheroes is already taking up, most of my headspace when it comes to when it comes to YouTube. I was about to say when it comes to video production work, but I've actually been doing other video production work outside of YouTube as of late. one of the things with with my work on Let's Be Superheroes, I did the video on Food Not Bombs, and then I also was doing the video on National Union of the Homeless. And somebody who I met while working on the Food Not Bombs video, and then reconnected with when I started work on the National Union of the Homeless video, um, works as part of a media team for multiple groups. So I'm working now as part of that media team to try and film various events and provide raw footage for their professional editors to put together to help raise awareness for the National Union of the Homeless, the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, and the Poor People's Campaign. So I'm trying to um, help out with all three of those groups, um, along with various tangential projects that they do. There was a like leadership advocate, um, and I'm butchering the name of it, like workshop series that where we did a series of interviews. So that was something else that I contributed to, um, and I'm getting to work with good people on good stuff. One of the um, one of the people working with the media team is based out of New York, and he's actually an award-winning documentarian. So I'm looking forward to working with him more and learning from him if I can. So that's I haven't been slacking when it comes to video production. I just haven't been doing Power Rangers content. Because let's face it, there's like hundreds of hours of video of me talking about Power Rangers on the internet now. I don't know how much more there is I can put out there without neglecting the other aspects of my life. And yeah, RJ hasn't been properly introduced to Power Rangers yet. I'm still waiting on getting to that sort of emotional maturity level of being able to appropriately differentiate, TV violence with real life violence. So surprisingly, we haven't done much of any Power Rangers for the kids. As much as I love the franchise, I want to make sure that I'm being responsible, and that's you know that's me gauging my own child's behavior. No judgment on any other Ranger fans out there who introduce their kids to it straight off the bat. Go for it. There were like some things that we watched with RJ in the room back when they were a baby. There's things like that. They've actually seen a little bit of Power reviews because we were like flipping through YouTube and they're like, I want to watch Papa because Papa was came up as a recommendation. So I let them watch one of the final episodes of Power reviews, and they tuned in and out. They didn't fully understand what the plot was, but that was probably the most action violence stuff that they've actually seen. They watch like Spidey and His Amazing Friends, but that's all you do is you run away from something and occasionally shoot some webs, and that's about it. So that's the extent to which my kids have been exposed to like Power Rangers and superheroes, because they can get a little riled up otherwise, and I don't want them getting too rough with each other. Let's see. So funny thing is, I actually introduced myself to it thanks to Dino Charge and all of the seasons up to either Super Mega Force or Dino Charge's first 8 episodes being released on Netflix. Good times indeed. Yeah, I've been with Power Rangers since the beginning. I'm part of the old guard. Getting older every day. and probably have a little bit more gray. That's one of the other reasons I'm kind of glad that Power Review's ending, because otherwise I was gonna have database getting a little too gray. I am officially 40 now, so I think I'm getting on the old end for some things. Uh, Thank you, Simeon, for the happy anniversary. Can't believe it's been a whole year since the only PR fan film I wholeheartedly enjoy wrapped up. Yeah, Power Reviews, is in many respect a Power Rangers fan film in 100 parts. Probably the most ambitious Power Rangers fan film project. Probably the most ambitious Power Rangers fan video project of all time. I think I can claim that brag. Um, there in terms of actually completed. There have been fan films that have aimed for some big stuff, and then they weren't able to deliver, or there were fan films that did deliver, but they were just singular fan films. But a 100 episode series that told a complete story is something that I don't think anyone else can necessarily claim in the Power Rangers fan video media landscape. Now, out of the 3 Power Rangers movies, which one is my favorite? So I feel like the Mighty Morphin movie might win out just due to sheer nostalgia. I appreciate things about all 3 of them. I feel like the first Power Rangers movie really had a very distinctive aesthetic that that grabs you well. Ivan Ooze is a fantastic villain. I felt like Turbo actually had a little bit more of a fleshed out story. In terms of it, I felt like with Mighty Morphin, like the challenges on Phaedos, I felt like we had the dinosaur, and then we were at the temple, and then they got their powers back. Whereas in Turbo, there was a little bit more of the journey of, we got the Ghost Galleon, and we've got the Putrids, and we've got, it felt like an expansion of the show narratively. Whereas Mighty Morphin felt like an expansion of the show aesthetically. And then the 2017 movie, was very much its own thing, and was just a fantastic experience getting a chance to see it and see the premiere. Like that was phenomenal, and I felt like that movie handled things really well. In terms of so many things with character. It had 3 main flaws that I've discussed before. And I went to go see it in theaters twice more after the premiere. I went with MJ, and then I also took some of my boarding school students on a field trip to see it as well. So yeah, I have trouble picking favorites sometimes. I feel like because I grew up with the Mighty Morphin movie, that's probably what I'm leaning towards at the moment. But like, whenever a new one came out, I was like, I would be like, oh, this is so cool. And then that one would bump up, would lead for a little while. Yeah, I remember saying, and I think I actually told this to the director, Dean Israelite, was that the 2017 Power Rangers movie was it was like it had an emotional I said something about it being so emotionally intelligent, and probably more emotionally intelligent than our fandom deserves, something like that. I was impressed by the emotional intelligence, and that it was probably more emotionally intelligent than our fandom deserves. I made some sort of comment like that to the director, as a compliment, because I felt like he did a really good job taking what should be the most aesthetically nostalgia moments of the morph sequence and the Megazord sequence, and instead making them the emotional turning points of the film. And I felt like that was a really bold choice. Um, I think there was a certain lack of satisfaction in a lot of the audience, but I can't fault him for taking that bold choice to commit to the emotional core in those moments. Um, and yeah, Simeon saying Turbo's fave because it feels more like the show, um, and it's not trying to be something that's not the show. And that was also great about Turbo. All three of them had something that was really great in them that I really liked. Um, yeah, if you ever start a Power Rangers club, go on a field trip to Power Rangers movie or local convention, go for it. Yeah, it is a shame the 2017 movie didn't get a sequel. Um, and you know, I think that part of it was just that the aesthetics didn't vibe with audiences. Um, People who did see it liked it, but I think but there was a certain it was just missing that last little bit that would have made it really get strong word of mouth. And I think the things were, that opening joke with the bull. I think and this is for me, that opening joke for the bull, I think set a poor standard for what the humor of the movie was going to be. Um, and then the management of Kim's character arc was very muddied because it was sort of a redemption arc that kind of ended up uh, culminating in a little bit of a payback character moment, and that didn't vibe well. So these were like things that I think people may or may not have picked up on a subconscious level, and definitely were the things that didn't vibe for me with the movie. And the third thing that I think really would have made a difference, and these are things while keeping the vision of the movie that Dean Israelite clearly had. The third thing that I think really was the missed opportunity was there was a lack of character intentionality in the action choreography. And that was a major element of Mighty Morphin that they left out of the 2017 movie. Every character in the original Mighty Morphin team had an extremely distinct fighting style that was a joy to watch. And the movie didn't capture that. And if they had, they could have had that initial unmorph fight against Rita be a moment of selling that. And then when we see them morphed, to see those same fight styles conveyed in battle while morphed, it would have created that stronger connection to who they were as characters, and it wouldn't have made the morphed fight feel so divorced from the rest of the movie. That's what I think was the missing bridging element there that they really needed, because otherwise it felt like, oh, all this stuff got rushed to the end. There was all this cool character drama before that, but those were two separate things. And I felt like that could have been the big bridging element, and that's what I always kind of harp on with that movie. Um, when I when I was at Power MorphCon for the Dino Thunder review, did I get a chance to meet everyone off camera? Oh, well, anyone who showed up in a cameo, obviously I talked to them before they showed up in a cameo. And we talked over. Okay, this is what I want you to do. Let's try this out. Okay, this is what I want you to do. Let's try that out. And they were all good sports about it. They all found different things that would be fun. I basically I hadn't even scripted the episode yet. I just had the loose idea of the premise, which is basically that I'm trapped in this you know false reality where everybody's my biggest fan. And they were all happy to play into it. Um, I, I really am. I'm sad that I didn't follow up quickly enough with David Fielding to be able to have him reprise the role of Zordon um, in those later episodes. That was part of the plan. That was part of the plan for '97 to actually have David Fielding, and he was up for it. And I just didn't. It took me just. I was just so behind on so many things. I didn't have the script ready for him in time. And so by the time that I followed up saying, "Hey, I think I finally have this script ready to go. Are you still up for it?" He's like, I'm sorry, I'm not doing fan voice acting anymore. I'm focusing on my writing." And I'm like, "That's totally fair. That was me dropping the ball. That would have been a great opportunity, but that was me dropping the ball. I tried. I just had too much on my plate. I was trying to do too many things. Um, but I hopefully did the character of Zordon justice. I hope I did with my voice acting. I really, really um, tried my best. That was the most challenging voice acting of the series for me, trying to mimic Zordon. Um, yeah, the aura around 2017 being an overwhelming, it's fine for general audiences, not enough to launch the franchise back. Yeah, and I feel like if we had just really nailed that action choreography, that was one of those things about the original Mighty Morphin season 1 that I feel really was a hook, and we missed that hook. Um, and yeah, the Dial Thunder one was the one where you helped with filming, Simeon. That is correct. Um, yeah, we were bouncing all over the place. I was like changing clothes while you were manning the camera and making sure no one would knock it over or anything for that one bit where like the landlord was walking through the art gallery with DB, and I just like I know you didn't had no idea what it was I was doing. It was just like into because I barely knew what I was doing, but you were pleasantly surprised, if I recall correctly, to see me um reprising the landlord. I know this was like what was this? This was 2016, 2018 that we were filming that. So it was a long time ago, I know. It was like 7 or 9 years ago. And yeah, Sean from Orange Ranger did a good job playing Darkonda. And that was also an interesting thing where I kind of layered both of our voices, and he also he worked hard to try and match the voice, and I gave him notes, and we went kind of back and forth. I'm like, okay, I think that you maybe were that your emphasis here wasn't quite right there. Oh, your pace, maybe slow down your pacing or speed up your pacing in this spot or that spot. And we worked it out back and forth. That was very collaborative. And then I was also trying to make sure that it matched with my physical performance. And I also was still doing the deeper echoing on Darkonda because I'd been using that with the Omega agents already. It seemed like that would carry through with Darkonda as well. So that was an interesting little meld of performances there, and I'm really happy I got to work with Sean on that. Oh yeah, I just remember asking what's going on, and then I did the landlord voice, like, oh yeah. Um, so if Power Rangers was never canceled, what Super Sentai show do you want to adapt? Um, so I had a number of ideas of different of different series I would have adapted into fan films, like I did with Grid Defense, which I still find it so funny that Beast Morphers ended up coming out 3 years later in 2019, and I still wonder if I in some way inspired that. I don't think I'll ever really know, um, but I suspect that I may have had an influence. Um, it's not something where I'd like, oh, you stole my work, blah blah blah. Blah. No, I'd be flattered if that was actually the case, because I know that um, I did share a link to Grid Defense with the team because I didn't think they were going to adapt Go Busters, and I did notice that there were some parallels between Grid Defense and Beast Morphers. They obviously, did their own thing. There were certain elements in common, but they clearly did their own thing. And they might not even, and it might not have been one of those things where it's just like, they think of an idea and didn't remember that, I had done a similar thing in Grid Defense. And I don't know how many people on the team even watched it. Maybe one person did, but another person didn't. And I don't know who came up with which idea. So yeah, it would be funny if they had an inspired by credit, but obviously not. And then, but in terms of which Sentai series would I like to adapt, I had thought about, but this was before Cosmic Fury. I thought a lot about what a adaptation of Q Ranger would look like. That would have been a lot of work. I would have wanted to have aliens with prosthetics. That would have been such a big project. And it basically would have been Power Rangers meets Farscape. If you've ever seen Farscape, you kind of know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen Farscape, it's a sci-fi show from the late 90s, early 2000s, where an Earth astronaut gets launched through a wormhole and ends up in the far side of the universe hanging out with a bunch of aliens, trying to figure out how to get home. And I would basically be that premise. Only it would be like a teenager gets abducted by aliens, or a teenager, and it was going to be a teenager and his younger sister get abducted by aliens, and he would spend like the first season trying to find her, and then the second season protecting Earth from alien invasion. And they'd meet a bunch of aliens along the way, and they team up and become Power Rangers. And that was the basic idea of what a Q Ranger adaptation would look like. And I think that would have been fun to pursue. Obviously, it ended up being the Zords ended up being used in Cosmic Fury. So and I'm not really in the fan film game at the moment. But then I was also thinking about what as I was watching Sentai series, like I was thinking about what would these adaptations look like. So, Zyuohger, which was right before Q Ranger, I would have liked to see as a trapped in a video game plot, to explain the sort of pixelated aspect of the weapons and Zords, and I thought that would have been a lot of fun. Them be basically, kind of a Power Rangers meets Digimon kind of situation. And I think that would have been a lot of fun. The Sixth Ranger would have been someone from the real world who's playing as an avatar of themselves, and initially thinks that they're just fighting, digital enemies, and then realizes they're real people, and then works with them to try and save them. And that would have been the Sixth Ranger arc. For Tokuger, it would have been teenagers who get trapped on an interdimensional train. For whatever reason, all three of these were really, kind of had that trapped in another world theme to them, trying to get back home. So Tokuger would have been Power Rangers meets Sliders, basically. But it would be on a train. And that would give you a chance to explain, okay, why all these different stations are, have all the weird and wacky stuff going on. I would have had them be like delinquent teenagers who are, who act younger than they are to kind of play into the fact that they're kids. Things like that for that one. And then the fourth one I thought of was after Q Ranger was Lupin Ranger versus Paddle Ranger. And that one I was thinking would be cool to have it be a semi-dystopian future where the Paddle Rangers are enforcing an authoritarian regime, and the Lupin Rangers are freedom fighters who are liberating artifacts that have been that had been obtained by the authoritarian regime, and so there'd be that conflict, but the Powder Rangers would still think that they're the heroes. The Lupin Rangers would be the actual heroes, and then eventually the Powder Rangers would realize, oh, these are the people that we've been working for. The Lupin Rangers were the good guys the whole time, and now we'll team up. And that would have been how I would have handled the whole cops and robbers element, because the obviously that cops and robbers element became very controversial with the Black Lives Matter movement. Um, movements like defund the police, abolish the police, um, made the glorification of police a lot more questionable, and the glorification of crime obviously um, is questionable in general, and that would have been kind of how I would wanted to thread the needle there with those two. I like how all your pitches were boiling down to, here's a huge headache for folks shooting the U.S. footage. Well, not necessarily. I don't think that production-wise, anything that I've described would have been more challenging than, let me put it this way. All of these ideas that I put forward, I would want to have Greg Aronowitz back. If you have Greg Aronowitz back, all of these are absolutely doable. Especially, can you imagine Greg Aronowitz for a Q Ranger adaptation? Come on. We'd be perfect. And the funny thing, I have Power Rangers Minecraft series that's in the work that is more a collaboration with Minecraft Unity, but in your mind still counts as a U Ranger adaptation. Absolutely. Why not? A Zyuohger adaptation. Absolutely. Why not? And keep in mind, when I'm describing these are like fan film ideas that I had that I would have liked to pursue in the way that I pursued Power Rangers Grid Defense, or were ideas for if I actually worked on the franchise, like how I would have handled those series. So like, really what it comes down to is I would have been making a big headache for myself. These were thought experiments I was pursuing. But yeah, I always thought that, like, oh man, ideal dream scenario would be, let me do a Q Ranger adaptation. I'll bring back Jackie and I'll bring back Greg. And that's what I would have, that would have been, like how I would have handled a Q Ranger adaptation. I think that would have been just fantastic. But, you work with what you got, which for me was, I never got into the franchise. I got close. I got close a few times. I never quite made it in. The timing just never quite panned out right. With all the ways that the franchise changed hands, and Chip was in charge of the series, and he was focusing on the writers that he was already developing. So I never ended up quite making it in, but I got some meetings. The last one was back in 2019, and after that, I kind of wondered maybe that might be it, and that was about it. Maybe there's some future in years down the line. I don't know what it would be that would allow me to still live that dream. But for right now, in our current moment in history, I'm focusing on other things for arguably the first time in my life. Not prioritizing Power Rangers in the way that I had for 30 years. And that's a little weird, but these are all the things I'm doing now are things that I've been thinking about for a long time and wanting to do for a long time. And I feel like completing Power Reviews got me to a state where I'm confident enough in myself and who I am that I can actually pursue these other things and feel confident in my ability to do so. Um, and and feel like I'm not being held back by um, my obsession or fixation on a specific children's franchise that has been very meaningful to me, but has also been kind of something I've been tied down by to a certain extent, and it's good to be able to kind of evolve past that, even while still recognizing like I can sit and talk Power Rangers with anybody at any time about whatever you want. Um, you know, I and I'm still proud of everything that I've done. Still happy with what I've done. I'm gonna still check out whatever new stuff comes out. Um, I gotta sit down and read some more comics. Haven't been good about that. Um, my local comic shop unfortunately isn't carrying them anymore, so I gotta figure out a new source. Um, but yeah, no, if Hasbro isn't gonna do a collaboration with Minecraft, then yeah, you do it yourself. Why not? Um, I think it would be a fun world where you know you can just if you want to create something you know that might be this big franchise or whatever, you can just do it and not have to worry about not having the money for it or not having quite the rights or whatever. Just if you want to show your love for a franchise, you do it. um, you do it in whichever way feels right for you. um, I've got a lot of thoughts on the world as it currently is and the world that I'd like to see. And a lot of that is driven by, my relationship with Power Rangers. And I'm trying to keep carrying that forward. Yeah, I will say I am very tired. It's been a long day, long week. Last week I took the kids down to see my parents, so that was a big drive. And I swear I've had like something going on every afternoon and evening for like the last few days. It's been ridiculous. It's like, okay, I've got a meeting after school on Wednesday, and then I'm going down to a town board meeting Wednesday night, and then I've got to meet with students after school on Thursday. I gotta go take care of a doctor's appointment, and I gotta pick up the kids, and then I got a Zoom meeting at 6 o'clock with Poor People's Campaign. And then on Friday, I've got something going on with my teachers union, and then I come home, and then and the car broke down, so I had to give MJ a ride, and then we have the live stream tonight, and then I'm having the I know tomorrow is the big No Kings protest, and I'm still trying to decide if I'm going to go check out what's going on there. And I've got the podcast interview I'm doing with Simeon tomorrow night. I've got some friends coming over for an Avatar: The Last Airbender themed D&D night on Sunday. I've got so many things going on every night. Monday I'm going to do a run for Transportation for Food Not Bombs. I'm still doing that. And in the evening I'm going to go check out my local Democratic Party meeting for the first time. So to see what's going on with our town elections, and learn a little bit more about what that party is doing. So I keep myself busy. If you've seen the Let's Be Superheroes episode video on civic engagement, that's kind of a rundown of all the things that I've been doing, and I'm doing more things than that now. I'm working on trying to get some traction on a potential universal pension program for the state. That's a big project that I'm only just now getting started with. So that gives you some idea of why I'm so tired and so busy, and haven't been that active on social media lately. Um, I've had so many things going on in real life. It's been a very busy year, and I'm sure that next year is going to be just as busy. I need to work on trying to take better care of myself. Um, Working to get myself checked out on a few things. Um, Working to try and maybe get down to the root of why I have those recurrent vasovagal syncope episodes um, that I've shared here before, um, so that I can make sure I'm taking better care of myself. I'm 40 now, so I'm trying to be extra cognizant of my health, so that I can stick with you guys, keep doing the good work for a good long while. And to answer Scott's question, are robots still cool in the AI invasion? Yeah, robots are still cool, especially fictional ones, who are nice. Because, all right, so I don't know, do you guys want my rant on AI? I've got rants on AI. I don't. If you want, okay, so if you want me to get into other topics, I have a lot of opinions on a lot of topics. If we want to get into that, we can get into that. I'm here for you. Whatever it is that you guys want out of this live stream, this 1 year later live stream, looking at what is Jake like a year after Power Reviews. I can get into whatever it is you want to get into. Yeah. Robots are still cool because AI is just a marketing tool for generative algorithms. Those are nothing like the robots we know and love from fiction. That is true. So AI, in terms of how it is currently employed in common nomenclature, is not actual artificial intelligence. It is large-scale machine learning, okay, but in terms of the way in which we are currently seeing AI being marketed, there's a big mixing and meshing of all sorts of different concepts. There's very specified uh, machine learning tools. Those things, fine. That's good technology. Developing better, um, you know, biological scanning techniques. Fantastic. You're better able to locate a cancer tumor. Fantastic. That's good. Machine learning as a concept is good. But what we are seeing in terms of generative AI, the efforts at AI mimicking humanity is terrible, because they're not actually doing that. Generative AI in terms of writing, things like ChatGPT, these ChatGPT, Grok, whatever you want to call the other ones, I think Gemini, those are um, aggregate and predictive um, uh, language models. So what they do is they just take in all of humanity's produced written works that are available on the internet, and you ask them a question, and they approximate the most likely answer to that question based off of the way that question has been answered in the past by real people. They're not actually figuring out what it is you're asking. They are looking at basically mixing and matching and creating an aggregate. It is functionally your auto-suggest tool in your phone when you're typing and it suggests your next word. It's that turned up to 1,000,000, because it's just like, okay, the next word would be this, and then the next word would be that, and now you have a whole thing. But it just goes word by word. It does not actually form coherent theses. It doesn't actually make an argument. It just presents the approximation of one. And that could seem like the distinction of, oh, but how do humanity work? We plan out what we intend to say and then figure out the way to say it. When it comes to computers and language models, they're doing the opposite. They are just figuring out the way to say something and not actually knowing what it is that they're communicating. That's why they can't even do math anymore, because that's not what they're programmed to do. They're just programmed to use a massive sea of data to approximate what a human would say. That's it, and it's just based off of patterns in human communication. But what's making it far worse is that in order to do that, it means it needs access to a bunch of things that violates all sorts of copyrights. So that's one thing. Another thing is that it requires so many resources that it is just draining energy, draining water for cooling all these servers. There's so much of our energy sector is being soaked up by these massive data centers that just do not actually serve a practical purpose other than mimicking what an expert might say without actually having any of the framework to present expertise. They know what a source looks like, but they don't link to actual sources. They just know what these arguments look like, but they're not actually presenting arguments. They're presenting what those arguments look like. And that can be useful to a certain degree. But you know what would be a whole lot more useful is just asking somebody who's actually an expert. Just looking at existing models of how these arguments are framed and then going from there. And then you don't need to rip off a bunch of copyright and also drain a bunch of power. And then there's the actual application of this, because the application of it is they are trying to use it not just to give somebody an idea, but to actually replace the people who do the work. They are using approximations of intelligence to replace people where in places where actual intelligence is required. And so we're getting these things like AI produced articles on all these websites instead of them hiring actual writers, which is creating a big wealth of, I say wealth, just a big mass of improperly vetted information that is then going back into the system and creating even more improper information, because they don't have the capacity to differentiate between something that was produced by AI as an approximation of a human and things that were produced by actual humans who actually checked over whether the information was true or false. So that's, one, we're draining all our resources to produce worse data, and we're putting people out of work who are actually supposed to be producing the information and the arguments and the art that we are looking for. So we're putting those people out of work while also engaging in other forms of heavy exploitation. Because the thing is, these outputs aren't simply the result of machine learning. They are also the result of humans checking the machine's output. There are what are now being called micro-employment, where people in other countries just look over these outputs from ChatGPT and Grok and say, okay, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. And they get paid cents per interaction. So we are taking all this money away from people who actually need to survive. We are defunding our actual experts on real things, our actual artists who are creating real things, and we are pouring that money into these just resource siphoning engines that need to be maintained by exploited people in other countries. Like, there's so many levels on which this is terrible. It's putting people out of work, it's exploiting people in other countries, it's draining our resources, and it's actually poisoning our access to information. And it's doing all of this not in a way that's actually even profitable. It's creating this massive economic bubble where it's on the promise that it will do something that it is not programmed to do, which is be actually intelligent and actually replace a person. And it can't do that because that's not what it's programmed to do. And all this money is getting poured in thinking, oh, just a little bit more, just a little bit more, just a little bit more, and then it'll be like a real person, and then we don't need to worry about hiring real people, and then all these funds will pay off. And that's not going to happen. And it's just messing with our markets while putting people out of work. while putting people into exploited micro-employment situations and poisoning our planet and poisoning our collective knowledge. So whenever people are saying that, AI, it's out there, we just got to get used to it, recognize that, like when they say, oh, the cat's out of the box when it comes to AI, there are so many resources going into keeping that cat running. And we don't need to be. If we just said, look, there are hard limits on copyright in terms of what you can access for these data centers. Look, there are hard limits on the actual resources you can siphon off in terms of energy for these data centers. Then this technology would die because they wouldn't be able to maintain it without those exploitations of our knowledge, of our resources, and of our workers across the globe. So no, AI is not inevitable. It actually is something that is being forced upon us in an effort to basically transform us into people who cannot demand things and instead are just going to be siphons for, ticket sales, content. We're just the viewers of this. We ask for things, we get them. We're isolated. We're not working together on things. There's so many different elements in which this is just it is the inverse of every AI apocalypse that we ever predicted, because the AI apocalypse that we predicted in the past, it was always the AI that was taking us over, because somebody thought that maybe it would be better. And instead, people are just, kicking us out of our spaces as humans for something that doesn't even effectively mimic humanity. It's wild. So there you go. That is, when you ask for Jake to do a rant on something, that is what you can get. And yeah. And there we go. I'm seeing Simeon was following along and didn't realize it had become such a soapbox for him until just now. Yeah. Have it, certain elements of AI that can be done in isolation, where you don't need access to mass computing to accomplish, and it's just clever algorithms. That's great. You have, in video games, you're always working on developing better AI characters. You do that just in terms of developing better algorithms, better programs. You don't do that by just brute forcing, all of humanity's resources into very basic things. And yeah, it's cannibalizing itself. It's doing all these things. Yeah, if we had some sort of sustainable energy model, okay, but even this is going so far beyond sustainable. Give you my hot take on Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer has been very disappointing as a leader of an opposition party. He's from my state, and he is very clearly not rising to the moment. I am a Jewish New Yorker. I connect in terms of that identity of being a Jewish New Yorker, but yeah, he's fundamentally trying to operate under rules that are not still viable. He's still acting like, like all you need to do is express your disapproval, and that's sufficient. And that you can still work together on things. There's still collaboration, because that's the way government's supposed to work. And it's just, that's not how it's currently working. you can't just cordially work with somebody who has said that you're an evil terrorist bent on destroying America when you're just an old man with glasses that keep slipping down your nose. Like, what world are we in? What world are we in? So basically, use AI responsibly. The way you use AI responsibly is by avoiding it pretty much always. In terms of generative AI, when you do a search, try to remember to do -AI. I don't remember to do it as often as I should, and I feel bad about it because I know that it's always doing that on automatic. I need to get like a browser extension or something. I'm bad with getting browser extensions. Like, there are things I should do that I don't, and it's just, part of having ADD, part of just being a scattered, very busy individual. But yeah, we're in tough times. We're in a situation now where, regardless of what we do as individuals, we currently have systems where businesses are being empowered to just drain our resources without any check, without even having employees doing work. Like, they just build a massive server farm. It's not even like an office building where there are a bunch of people working it. It's just this massive server farm that just drains our energy. And it's like, okay, I'm like monitoring my water intake in my house. I've gotten solar, but they're just like chugging down entire reservoirs and, chugging through those fossil fuels. And it's such a disproportionate exploitation of resources that, if this continues, there's very little that we can do as individuals to actually curtail the effects of climate change, because, the vast majority of humanity could be reducing their fossil fuel consumption. But then you just have like one guy who just keeps buying computers and hooking them up to a reservoir. It's crazy. How do I feel about the current era of The Daily Show? Speaking of Jewish New Yorkers, I like their new rotation. I think that that's a smart choice. It creates some variety in the show. I do like that. I do feel like it is one of a number of ways you can absorb political news in a way that's not tremendously frustrating, that can, add a certain degree of levity to it, and there's value in that. I've recognized that although they may be somewhat progressive, they are not always in line with quite how dire things are. And that can be frustrating sometimes. And they fall for certain centrist traps every now and again. I've been pretty clear, I think, on my opposition to the Republican Party and its descent into fascism over the years, over this last decade. I've openly talked about the definitions of fascism and how Donald Trump fits those definitions, and how the party continues to support him and further descends into those excesses. And I think it's important that I'm not using that term as a pejorative, but as a descriptor. And I watch The Daily Show sometimes, and I get frustrated because I'll see them occasionally try to play it down. Jon Stewart on a number of occasions, on at least one occasion, has saying like, oh, we can't call this fascism because this is still just the system that we broke and the system that we built, and the system that we built is still very broken, but we're still operating with that system, and so it's not fascism yet. And we can't cry fascism early because then when it hits, no one will believe us. And that is, I think, a naive framing to a degree, and it's, or maybe naive is not the right word. I think that it's an inaccurate framing upon a certain perception of how fascism presents, and that's the idea that fascism is an a structure of government rather than an ideology, and there's an important difference there. Trump has been a fascist since he entered politics. He's espoused fascist ideology since he entered politics. I can't speak to him, prior to his run for president, because I didn't follow his political statements that closely, because he was just a reality show businessman. So I did not really notice what his opinions were, outside of that he kept trying to push the birther stuff with regards to Obama, and he was a conspiracy theorist. But since then, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is fascism, because what fascism ultimately is, and this is my interpretation, I will admit, this is my conglomeration of different definitions I have read. Fascism is an ultranationalist movement that scapegoats marginalized communities, marginalized populations, for the purposes of consolidating political power on behalf of corporate interests. So those are what I think are the four main aspects of it, and they're sub. But yeah, ultranationalist, scapegoats marginalized groups, and for the purpose to consolidate political power on behalf of corporate interests. You look at Trump's first speech when he announced for president, that's exactly what he's been promoting since then. So to say that it's not fascist yet is it's naive. It's inaccurate. It's not looking at fascism through the appropriate lens of what is fascism as an ideology, not what is, what does a fascist dictatorship look like? We are arguably not yet in a fascist dictatorship. We are transitioning into one, I believe. That has been the project of the current administration, and that is a major problem. We have seen, that from the first day back in office, Trump has tried to subvert the Constitution. He has tried to consolidate power within the office of the president. He has been taking away Congress's power of the purse illegally. He, tried to overrule an amendment to the Constitution, the 14th Amendment. That's not legal. He's been disregarding judicial orders, again, consolidating power within the office of the president that belongs to the other branches. Like, people keep talking about separation of powers and co-equal branches. He's just taking up all their powers. And there are elements that are still fighting back, specifically in the judiciary. But just the fact that the Daily Show is still buying into that, was still buying into the framing that it's not fascism yet because, oh, this got struck down in court, this got struck down in court. But that doesn't change what he's trying to do. And that doesn't change the fact that it being struck down in court doesn't seem to actually consistently stop what he's doing. So saying it's not yet fascist, I don't keep up with every episode, so we may have backtracked on that in more recent months. That rubbed me the wrong way. And when and later there was something that I think, in the wake of the Charlie Kirk shooting, that I think is troublesome, and it was something I observed in The Daily Show, is this discussion of free speech versus hate speech. And they did a whole discussion on free speech versus hate speech in an episode of The Daily Show. And what I found troubling about that was that the free speech versus hate speech argument has nothing to do with Charlie Kirk's actual shooting. They're saying, with the reaction to Charlie Kirk's shooting, it has nothing to do with that reaction, because hate speech does not apply to what people have been saying about Charlie Kirk. That's just not what that word means. Hate speech is hate directed at specific groups, not at a specific person. You can debate whether or not it's okay, for somebody to, criticize somebody post-mortem. Okay? People can debate that. But that doesn't make it, but hating somebody does not make it hate speech. And framing it that way is very troublesome, because that's what the Trump administration is trying to do. They're trying to frame hatred of an individual as being the actual definition of hate speech, and they're trying to use that to stifle criticism of their administration. So when people are talking about hate speech versus free speech, they're not talking about whether or not you can say a slur or not. They're talking about whether or not you can criticize individuals in power. And that is deeply troubling. And the fact that The Daily Show fell for that reframing was deeply troubling to me. Because their job is to skewer, poke holes in what politicians are doing. And the fact they missed that makes me worry about all the other people who don't make it their job to poke holes in these things. I feel like that's something that I didn't see anyone talking about in that moment, and that made me very concerned. So these are some of the things that get me thinking in these moments. So just kind of scrolling through some of the comments since I got on. You guys are getting me on some good rants tonight. This is you getting to see, kind of the unfiltered Jake to a degree. Obviously, I'm still recognize that I'm, that I'm publicly talking on the internet. I'm going to try and, be diplomatic in my language as I'm discussing these things, even as I do feel passionately about them. So let's see, misusing tech is definitely an issue. Let's hope new tech is more welcoming. Since you plan to take robotic causes in the future. Like studying robotics is cool. Like robotics and AI are two separate things in terms of how AI is currently presented. I think that's genuinely an interesting field, both in terms of the mechanics of how things operate, as well as developing, the programmatic algorithms to appropriately cater to human needs, and learning to better understand how humans operate. Like the study of human cognition is a fascinating study. I took a class back in college called Minds and Machines, where we had to build little Lego robots, and half of it was basically a philosophy course. Cognitive science is basically modern philosophy. It's understanding human thought and human argument and human behavior. And I find that very interesting when it's actually applied towards understanding rather than supplanting, which I feel is what the current technology is aiming for. Right now, preference for Last Week Tonight and YouTube shows like Some More News. I feel like those do a much better job at both Last Week Tonight and Some More News are shows that really have a focus on identifying the problem, whatever the problem might be, and exploring the reasoning around it, why it is the way it is, and and avenues for addressing it. And I really appreciate that both those shows have that structure. I assume that Some More News kind of took some inspiration from Last Week Tonight, and then they try and find ways um, to kind of layer the humor within that. Whereas uh, Daily Show tends to focus a little bit more on, okay, we're going to kind of make fun of both sides, and we're just trying to have a good time. And we're, when things get scary, we'll talk about it, but we're trying to be haha jokey folks. And there's a place for both of those. But in terms of what I find more cathartic and satisfying, it's when people can actually like call things out for what they are, because you want to hear that. You want to feel like you're not going crazy, and you want to see somebody else who's also going crazy over it. And that's the satisfying part about shows like that. Welcome, Vandalia. Glad you could say a quick hi. Sorry that you couldn't make it to your local protest. And yeah, fascism roaming around on the globe. That is a big problem. The biggest recommendation I have is to engage in your local community. The more engagement that we have in our local communities, the more resilience we will have against what is happening, and the better equipped we'll be to ultimately defeat it and build a better world. We can't do this in isolation. You need to work with your communities, because that's how that resistance happens. When you see people who are getting abducted by ICE agents, the people who don't get taken are the people who are protected by their community. When people turn out and say, you are not taking our neighbor, and ICE will run away. They don't stand firm on this stuff because they know that they do not have the people behind them. But you don't see that kind of defense unless you have that kind of community. So community is going to be core to moving forward. It's going to be core to building electoral power, and it's going to be core to overriding all the different systems that are coming into place that are working to solidify the current fascist government that we are facing. Now, have I bothered to watch Andor yet? I've seen the first season. I haven't had a chance to watch season 2 yet. I want to watch season 2. Because I'm really interested in it. The first season, they really did. I really liked how they explored all these themes. It does have a little bit of a slow pacing to it. To my understanding, that pacing picks up a lot in season 2. I know very little about what's happening in season 2 yet, but I really do want to check it out. It's high on the list of shows that I gotta check out. I just haven't had much time to watch TV because I'm not doing the same kind of like long marathon editing that I used to be. But I did like how, Andor in season 1 really did address a lot of the manner in which authoritarianism operates, the manner in which it is resisted, the flaws, the complexities, the moral grays, while still having a clear right and wrong in terms of purpose. It's something that's difficult, and I feel like the show handled it quite well in its first season. It's definitely a slow burn kind of show, and I want to see how that continues in season 2. And yeah, political issues can be dicey. Like, I'm not going to share all of my thoughts on everything because, to be honest, sometimes that can work across purposes. Like, the people that you're talking to are not always going to be aligned with you ideologically, and that's just kind of a natural mode of life. So you pick and choose what issues and what framing works best within the context of who you're talking to. And I'm talking on the internet to a whole bunch of people, so I'm going to try and keep things, largely general while still addressing what I think is important. And I think that it is important to, name major challenges you're facing and to not have people feel like they're going crazy, to not feel like people are alone in this. Like, one of the things that we've learned about the way that fascism operates is that, all those silly villains that you used to watch on your Saturday morning cartoons were not that big of an exaggeration. Fascists are silly. They're foolish. They don't think things through. They don't have big Machiavellian plans. They just want to try and do what they want to do at the expense of everybody else. And the danger comes from when they are empowered to do so. When you get down to it, the fascists of World War II, they were able to get away with so many things because a reasonable person wouldn't be doing the things that they were doing, because a reasonable person would be thinking about, what does the future actually look like? What does sustainability look like? What can I do to keep my my nation surviving, as opposed to just lashing out in rage at all the people who are different from you. Like, that's one of the things that caught so much of the world, on the back foot when it came to the fascists of World War II. Like, when you actually look at, their strategy was not good. Like, the whole, as you may recall from The Princess Bride, one of the classic blunders is trying to start a land war in Asia. Like, Hitler, broke his alliance with Stalin and tried to attack one of the big superpowers of the world that he could have kept as an ally. But he just got but he was too short-sighted. And so he screwed that up. He was constantly doing that. Like, when people talk about, oh, you want to have like the kind of German generals they had in World War II, those German generals were constantly trying to stop their leader from having them do stupid things. Several of them were trying to remove him from power. The whole idea of, like, the efficiency of authoritarianism is a myth. Authoritarian regimes do not have any efficiency. Look at the Department of Government Efficiency if you want an idea of what authoritarian efficiency looks like. They simply claim efficiency. They claim that they are going to be stronger and more militarily capable. They just repeat and repeat and repeat, and just enough people believe them that it becomes a common knowledge. But if you dig into what they actually do, it is foolish, it is messy, it is short-sighted. They have disproportionate power because the people who are already in power are greedy and do not want to lose what they have. And that is the core of it. There are people in power who feel as though the system is collapsing, and rather than work towards a better one, they are fighting to keep the old one by force and take whatever they can get before everything falls apart. That's what we're looking at. And people like that can be outsmarted. They can be defeated, but it requires a unity of purpose in terms of solidarity with your common, with your common human, with your neighbors. And it's tough. Like we're internet people. We don't like to go outside. We don't like to go out and talk to people and hang out in places. I don't know about you guys. I've got anxiety, I've got autism, I got ADHD, I got all sorts of things going on. It's difficult, but it's necessary in order to shape a better world. So that's me getting on that whole soapbox. I got plenty of soapboxes. I got so many boxes of soap. Um, so let me see how what are some of the other comments here. Um, there are no witches on the moon. Okay, fair. Then maybe not everything is quite accurate, so that's fair. Oh yeah. That's like they're also just weird. They get weird obsessions, weird fixations. Yeah, yeah. If you're a people person, like connect to people and find out what's going on in your community. What can you do to help? That's the entire purpose of the new channel of Let's Be Superheroes, is to give people avenues for that connection. And for me to also be forming those connections as well. I'm trying to do the same work. I'm trying to do that work, and I'm trying to model it for everybody else because I feel like it's really important. I'm looking, that's why I did the video on food not bombs, so that you can know how you can connect to people in your area and make sure that everybody is fed, and maybe make sure that you're able to get food too. Civic engagement, I wanted to make sure that people know how to engage with their governments on that, local level. The National Union of the Homeless, everyone needs housing. Everyone needs housing, and everyone is at risk of potentially losing it. When I say everyone, I mean the vast majority of people. I think approximately half of Americans are like 1 or 2 missed paychecks away from poverty. It doesn't take much. So recognizing these people who have been dismissed by society are part of your community is really important. There's so much solidarity to be had that is incredibly important moving forward. Yeah, and see, yeah, I'm just kind of reading over what people are saying. Charm would be one required to. Speaking of powers, charm would be one required to help the community. I'm glad that the civic engagement video was so helpful. Like it was one that I kind of threw together a little bit, but there were a lot of ideas in there that I really wanted to get out and that I thought were useful. And again, it's one that just kind of shows you what I've been up to, what I've been trying to do, and I've learned more since then. In terms of how things operate. I probably could have gotten into things like getting connected to your local political parties, other values of protests and things like that. There's a lot of stuff, and it's a learning process, and you need to be in that mode of learning. Good. You're emailing council members, listening to those local council meetings like podcasts. Yes, we will go online and watch people talk about and name things for hours on end. Might as well be somebody who's actually in charge of running the place you live. So let's do that. Let's do those things. One of the big things with this channel, with Power Reviews, for me was after a certain point, developing an audience, you Ranger fans out there, I felt as though there's a level of responsibility that comes with that. And, it's not like I have I don't have a huge subscribership in the grand scheme of things. I've carved out my little niche, I think, pretty well over the last 13 years. Over 4,500 of you now. And that's all, and can keep growing. Maybe one day I'll hit 5,000, who knows? Not that I, have much worth subscribing for here anymore. So, but I feel like when you're in that position of having people who listen to you in any meaningful way, there is a responsibility to try and work towards creating a better society. And I think that's part of why I'm not necessarily going to keep continuing with Power Rangers episode reviews, because while that is a means by which I can connect to people, I feel as though it's not a means by which I can make the world a better place at this moment. Like, I'm sure I've added entertainment value, and that's always valuable. And you have all those hundreds of hours of me and MJ and everybody else going through all that. And I think that's great, and I love that that's in the world, and I love that so many of you enjoy that so much. But I want to take the next step. And that's what I've been trying to do this past year. And I think I've made a lot of progress. A lot of progress. Not as much as I would like. Never as much as I would like. Because, there's always more. But a lot of things are moving forward that give me some degree of hope for the future. I don't know how this all is going to go, but I know I'm going to be trying to make things better. And I'm going to be doing that through continuing to build these connections and support people who I can support as best as I can, and communicating to all of you how you can do that too. I feel like that's just very important. It's important to me, and I think that's core to some of the values that I kind of developed growing up watching Power Rangers. The idea that anyone can be a superhero. The idea that anyone can help to save the world. And that, you have that ability to make things better. And then anybody can do that. Anybody can be a Power Ranger. And yeah, Power Reviews is a complete project. Like, I'm having this 1 year later live stream, and, I spent basically the first hour, talking about Power Reviews, Power Rangers. Just sort of a little catch up, but then we spent this next hour talking about all sorts of things in the world. I was almost going to sign off like 45 minutes ago, I think, and then I got into an AI discussion. And I think that's important to recognize that nobody is just one thing. You can be so many things. And there's so much power that you have. Like, I know where I live, I'm in a place where I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to make a difference. Without getting into specifics, I've mentioned before, we live right around the capital region in New York State. And New York State is a big state. But, when you're right by the capital of the state, you have access to people who make decisions that can affect the entire world. So, wherever you might be, think about what impact that place could have. Like, people down in Georgia. That state ended up being pivotal in the 2020 election, and pivotal in terms of us winning the Senate for 2 years from the Republicans. And that, I think, is something where, any state could potentially have something like that going on. Look into what is sort of that pressure point where you are. New York, we've got the stock market here. We're one of the biggest GDP producers on the globe, and there's a lot of power that comes with that. You know, what could flipping one seat in your state do? What could changing who the governor is do? What could forming a new program that fits people's needs do? And how can that work as a model for other areas to follow? You know, what can you do and what impact can it have? Probably more than you think. So much is done by so few people. Just keep adding a little bit more. And I think that we can find a way through what we're currently facing. So, yeah. This is what's on the forefront of my mind all the time now. Where once it was always Power Rangers and creating power reviews and finding a way to get on to Power Rangers and be a part of my favorite franchise. Now this is what's on my mind. Now I want to know what can be done to save the world. And I've got ideas, and I'm trying to follow through on them. Some of them are still getting fleshed out. But I think there is a path forward, which maybe that's naive. You know, I know that, you know, a lot of times in these, you know, authoritarian moments in history that, you know, it will require like military intervention from other nations and things like that. And I pray it does not get to that. Because among other things, I don't think other nations are going to try to go up against the United States with its military being the largest in the world by a factor. We're going to need to unite together and recognize that the strength that is being projected is just a projection. That the strength that comes from millions of people working together in unity is real and has power. We can all be Power Rangers. We can all have that countdown to destruction moment of saying, I'm Power Ranger, I'm Power Ranger, I'm Power Ranger. Let's make that happen. So, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything else from the chat. I don't know if there's anything else for me to say on all that. Other than thank you so much for joining me and for, you know, commemorating this occasion and for showing me that, you know, you still, you know, care so much about the work that I've done and hopefully care about the work that I'm trying to do now. And I'm touched by it. I'm glad to see so many familiar names in the chat, you know, that used to check in with me every week. I'm glad to see that you're still willing to pop on a Friday night. So thank you very much. I think we've got that's a wrap on questions and commentary. So let's let's close it out with our last three equally non-controversial phrases. So, number 1, say it with me, chat. Love is love. Number 2, say it with me, chat. Trans rights are human rights. And number 3, say it with me, chat. Robots are cool. Yeah, conceptually. All right. Thank you all very much. And I hope you all have a great night. I hope you all have a great weekend. I hope you're all able to find ways to be superheroes, to be Power Rangers. And I don't know when the next time is that I'll be popping into this channel, but until next time, farewell, Ranger fans, and let the power protect you.